Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Creative Differences podcast. This is episode 1, our review and discussion on The Last of Us Part 2. My name is Jarrett.
And my name is Humza.
And let's get started. I think this game is definitely has no controversies involved at all. I don't think anything, this is like a perfect release. Everything went well. The internet loves it.
How refreshing to have an entertainment thing have the full audience on board with it.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody dislikes this game.
No.
It's a full 10 on the old boards.
Yeah. In reality, that is not what happened, and talking about this game on the internet is exhausting.
This is exhausting. I'm excited. I want there to be like documentary stuff of the conversation that this game has brought in terms of controversy and the way that gamers are fucking nasty, man.
Yeah.
But we can talk about like The Last of Us in terms of what it kind of means, because it kind of changed gaming for the start of 2013. At the end of the PlayStation 3 generation, The Last of Us came out, which was a big story-driven narrative game that changed the audience perceiving video games. It wasn't a shooter that was just generic. It was something special. And The Last of Us 2 has brought something new to the table.
It was kind of the start of like the big Sony movie game genre that they've created within this generation especially. Because Naughty Dog in the past, they had Uncharted, but while those games did have the same kind of major set pieces and action sequences, I don't think the story for Uncharted is all that interesting in my opinion. I think it wasn't as serious as The Last of Us was, and when that came out, it kind of changed the way that people thought about how narrative and story in a video game could work.
The game had weight to it, not only
definitely.
with character, but with the world and the story that it was dealing with. It was something different. You never held the body of your dying daughter in a video game before. There wasn't anything like that. But now we're at the end of the PlayStation 4 generation, which is a fascinating point, because there's so much new tech, and this game really realizes that. So it's some very exciting stuff. And I think that we have both played through the game at least once. I've done a New Game Plus run, and I feel like we both kind of have pretty good knowledge on gaming. We're gamers.
Yeah. I would call myself a gamer.
I feel qualified to talk about this game properly. I don't want to be like another neckbeard idiot that's talking out of their ass. Like, I really want to have a good analysis of this.
Yeah, unlike half of the reviews that you've seen online and on Metacritic, we actually played the game and finished it. So I think to start, before we really get into it, this is full of spoilers. This is gonna be like from beginning to end. No, like, we're not holding back at all. Go play the game, and like, I don't know, just go at it with an open mind if it's something that you're skeptical about because of all of the leaks and all of the drama surrounding this release.
Yeah.
But I do recommend that you play it.
Yeah.
So this is your spoiler warning. From here on out, we're going to get into it.
Before we go spoiler, I think that, like, objectively, the game is good. If you are thinking about buying this game and you're willing to put $60 into it, you will get a good game experience out of it. It's definitely worth it. So I think that the point is that it's good, but let's dive into what makes it good and what makes it not so good in other parts. Let's start with the story. Let's start with where this kind of game picks up on. It picks up on the heels of the first game, where Joel and Ellie and Tommy have found this town of Jackson, Wyoming, and they have finally found peace. And the story definitely changes as they grow and they find out more about each other's past. And I think that's a fascinating point for this game to take. The intro is definitely. I felt like the intro was as advertised. It felt like everything that I saw from the trailers, I was like, okay, this is immediately what's going to happen. And then about maybe an hour or two in, everything fucking changes. I remember when the game launched, I was kind of tired, but I remember being in bed and hearing in the room across from me, I remember hearing Jarrett going like, "Oh shit!" And I was like, I wonder what he sees. And then I picked up the game later, and I was like, oh, that's what happens.
Yeah. I think the way that this game opens, 4 years later after the original, we get to see Ellie and Joel, these characters that we've kind of fallen in love with from the first game, have like the best life they could ever possibly have in this world. Like Jackson is like the as good as it's gonna get for this world, and they're thriving. But we soon, the way that the game kind of bridges those 4 years and kind of introduces the player to things that they didn't necessarily get to see before the game started through these flashbacks. It shows that when at the end of the first game, when Joel lies to her, Ellie never bought that. She deep down, I feel like Ellie knew that something wasn't right.
That was definitely a point that the first game left you on. That was like a cliffhanger point, but also something to like think about. And I realized that is now what they really wanted to fulfill on, was to satisfy the idea of Ellie's always known, and at what point is that cemented into her life. This game is really, there's multiple like points I feel like of just intense grief and loss and what it feels like, because we as the audience feel a tremendous loss when Joel is fucking beat in, but we also can translate that into that's exactly how Ellie feels when she learns that she was the cure and Joel took that from her. We feel that as Abby losing her father in a way, and yeah, so the story starts on the point of anger and revenge and having this good life taken from us. And I think that that's a pretty solid place to start. I feel like it's very similar to the first game in terms of having the world just turned upside down by a traumatic event, but it definitely takes its time getting there.
I really liked how they, like Joel's final moments. He doesn't really understand why Abby's now blown his knee off and is going to kill him, but he says, like, he tells her, like, I probably have it coming, so save your speech and just get it over with. Like, yeah. I think when this game came out and people saw all these leaks, a lot of people were like mad that Joel dies and think that he's like a really good person and that he's a beloved character. I don't think these games, the first game or the second game, ever shows you that Joel is a good person. These characters are very nuanced, and I think a lot of people were projecting their own ideas onto how they wanted this story to play out, and that's why people got so mad, I think. If you kind of look at these games and not as two separate games, which they are, but from the story perspective of this is part 2, that we weren't done, 7 years ago. We're seeing this story kind of come to a close, and if you look at them as at both parts as a whole, it's a very well thought out and put together story that ends in a way that makes the player feel very conflicted on what they've just experienced. And I don't really think I've played a game that makes me feel like that ever before. I think this game does a lot of innovation, not only tech. This game is gorgeous. This is the best game, I think, on the PS4 that I've seen so far. But it innovates in story as well.
Yeah, there's not many games that make you feel like there are going to be heavy consequences with your actions, especially for a game with 0 player agency. It's not a decision game. It's not.
This isn't Fallout.
No, it's not Fallout. It's not a Telltale game. It's none of that. It is full author storyline, which I kind of like because it means that everything is cemented and the choices are made in stone, which makes it way easier to kind of play through it. I think that's what people are angry about, is because of no player agency, people feel like they aren't satisfied with the story. But we'll get to like the ending and the idea of satisfaction, but the game certainly brings up the idea of consequences for the violent actions of all these characters. I think that's an important like thematic point for the story.
Let's talk about the new people that we get to meet. Like, let's start with like Dina and Jesse.
Yeah.
When you're in these first three hours, you get to see that since Ellie and Joel settled down in Jackson, Ellie's got to like be a kid, and she made friends, and she's had a relationship before all of this that we don't really get to see. There's Kat.
Yeah, there's a point with the character Kat, and she's the person who makes and does Ellie's tattoo.
Yeah.
And there's a point that made me realize that Ellie is now in a stable enough environment to have this like kind of mysterious love thing, but mostly just a friendship. And I think that is something that this society doesn't really allow for now. There aren't many friends in this world. So for Ellie to really have that is something that's very special.
She got to be a kid for a while, which is something that I don't think the world of The Last of Us many people get to experience.
Yeah. She is now, I feel, a lot older than people born into this world. I feel like the life expectancy of this outbreak world is not very long.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially once you like mow down hordes of people, you realize, no, these people don't really stand a chance.
I really liked Dina and Jesse. I really like them as characters. I think the performances from Shannon Woodward and Stephen Chang they were done so well that like it didn't take that long for me to like get invested in who these people were and wanting to see them succeed. The relationship that kind of unfolds between Ellie and Dina is really natural, and it's not something you really see in video games all that often. Like it feels like something out of a TV show, like a drama series on Netflix or something, you know?
I think that the best points with Jesse are certainly like the intro, because it's when you're walking through Jackson, and that point is so fun because it's like the first time that it felt like, the game is real. I am playing the fucking game now. It's here. I have it. And to be walking alongside that with Jesse is such a fun experience, because I like Jesse so much as a character, and fucking deserve better. But
I just want him to go home with his friends and be happy. That's all I wanted.
Jesse is probably one of the more neutral characters, just because of his involvement with everyone. Like, he's certainly wanting to go after Abby, but his loyalty is to his friends and to his family. And Ellie and Tommy and Joel are no exception to that. I feel like Dina, when I first played the game, I felt like she had this backseat like position of responsibility, of like Ellie has something that she needs to hold on to, and that is Dina back at like the theater once you've explored Seattle with her afterwards. I thought that was kind of one of the biggest things that I didn't like, but I never thought that her performance was lacking by any means.
No. Those hours you get to spend, before Joel dies and all the way through Seattle day one, where you're exploring that giant open space with her, really, like, not a very long amount of time in terms of the total gameplay, but what they were able to accomplish in the dynamic between Ellie and Dina in those short few hours, like, sold me on their relationship.
I loved exploring that world and finding out about the history of the Wolves and the Fedra and like what Seattle became during the outbreak of this civil war that was just desperate, and they are exploring the outside remnants of the city, and it feels like Abby being with the Liberation Front is definitely in center points, so they're seeing the fallout of their actions. But I was interested because from all the trailers and marketing material, I was set that like, okay, Ellie is very much in love with Dina and wants a relationship, but something happens while they are on a like expedition and a supply run, and Dina winds up dying, and
Yeah,
Ellie
that's what I
has to
thought
go.
too.
Yeah, Ellie has to go on revenge story for that. That's what it seemed like. Okay, that's what the story is, which was totally fine. But it being Joel is so much more impactful.
Yeah.
I think that really cements the fact that this game wants it to be a punch in the gut. You know, I think another thing for these podcasts is that we both watch a lot of media, so I think we're just gonna be talking about like what other people have said.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I really liked what Girlfriend Reviews has talked about with how Naughty Dog treats it as a kick in the gut and a frog in the throat of the intro, because that puts you in the perfect perspective of all these characters and what they're going through.
Yeah, I've never had a game, at least that I can think of, that makes me feel almost exactly like what the character is going through. Just the way that it lets you sit with the fact that you just watched Ellie's dad get her face bashed in. You know, like it made me feel like the way that Ellie felt for like a good portion. I was like I'm ready to go to Seattle to fuck Abby up. Like, let's go. And then when we get there, and the environmental storytelling, especially in that first part of like, if you explore everything, I think there's like an achievement in the game. Like if you get to every location that you can kind of explore, and you pick up all the notes and you kind of read through them, it kind of talks about who Isaac is, from the WLF, and how he led this group and over like just completely demolished Fedra and took over Seattle, and like you get to see that through all the notes. I think I would have preferred to see that, you know, in the actual game, but the fact that they thought enough about how to kind of set up this area that has been abandoned by the WLF, but was this kind of war zone for a while, and you get to see these notes and all these dead bodies from the soldiers, and it's like, oh, so that's what happened here.
It definitely felt like the first areas that you got to explore were like, they felt like they were picked clean. Like you're going through these military checkpoints, and it's like all of the supplies that we could have here are just fully empty because they've been taken by Fedra or the WLF or whoever is fucking surviving now. And I like that idea because it really cements the perspective of, yes, Ellie is the main character, but she is no different than any other life out here right now. You know, everyone's perspective is their own thing. I think that that's something that is pushed more so in Abby's storyline of like everyone has a story and everyone has something that they've lost and are willing to fight for. But Ellie's is much more personal and specific, and it's what we side with because we're the gamer. We're the fucking audience, and we understand what she's going through because we've played the first one and we've gotten some experiences with that. I feel like the game is very much like you should at least be familiar with the first game. I feel like if you weren't familiar with the first one at all, this game would feel very I think there's just too many elements that are different from the first one in terms of like being narrative. Because it definitely stands on its own as a sequel with introducing Abby and her whole side, as well with Dina and Jesse. But I think that if you like, it's the same thing with these Marvel movies. It's like if you want the true emotional impact, you gotta see the shit before.
Like there's a part in Seattle when you're going through that little section with Dina where they've put a bunch of like trip mines up, and Ellie's like, oh yeah, I went through a town puppet, and this dude, he did this to the entire town. And Dina was like, what, really? Like, how would he get around on it? And she was like, no, it's just him. She's talking about Bill from the first game. And I was like, see, I get it. I was there. I remember.
Yeah. It's also the point of, like, you understand the life that Ellie and Joel have had to endure with. You understand the world that this is. This game certainly feels very bleak and dark, but in a almost artful, hopeful way. Like, the world is destroyed and society has fallen, but this place is beautiful. Washington is a gorgeous exploration city. It's a wonderful environments to explore. Even when it's like flooding and storming, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that section in Seattle Day 2 when you're in the boat. That's Day 2, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Day 2 is it starts with you finding Tommy. Or not Tommy, Jesse.
Yeah.
You're back with Jesse.
And you go through the hospital and everything,
And then the third day as Ellie, you're in the storm, I feel like. And then you go to the aquarium.
Yeah.
That's how it, like, ends. I think Day 3 is when you first interact with the Scars as Ellie.
Yeah.
But yeah. I feel like, what were your favorite set pieces of Ellie's side?
I really think the like the part where you're just kind of like exploring, like you're not in combat, you're just kind of talking back and forth with Dina a little bit. It makes the like the plight of these characters, like you get to understand Ellie's mindset of like why she's, you know, hell-bent on figuring out what's going on here and getting her revenge. And then by the time you finish Seattle Day 1 and you get to the theater, and there's that part where like Ellie wakes up the next day or later, I can't remember, and then she's just kind of sitting in the main like where all the seats are in the theater, and she's playing her guitar, and she sings the song, the Pearl Jam song that Joel sings, and it's I don't know, it's really quiet. It's just Ellie, and I think that might be one of my favorite parts early on in the game.
I think there are certainly moments where there is a tremendous amount of work put in, and it's very easy to appreciate it when you're really looking around and understanding that, like, okay, we need to not only understand the challenges that Ellie and Dina are now facing in this world, but also what challenges are going to be facing the world as itself. Like, what is like, I love walking through these old buildings and Ellie and Dina talking through them and finding like the history. I think one of my favorite points in the game was when you're walking through an old bank and there was a bank robbery on the Outbreak Day.
Yeah.
And that was such a fun part of the game because there hadn't really been like a side quest area. That's definitely what this game feels like, is that there's big open areas to these levels that feel like there's like 2 or 3 smaller encounters, whether it's infected or with people, but there are these little areas that you can get fun stuff and supplies from. But that was one of the cool moments. I think some of my favorite encounters as Ellie are definitely the underground like subway fight with the red flares. That was a really cool thing because that introduced the idea of human and infected combat. And being able to pin one another against each other.
They also intro the Shambler in that section, and those things are gross, and they make awful noises, and I hate them. I would just use whatever I had to get rid of them as soon as I could anytime I entered an area where I could hear their like little noises.
I would always have like 2 Molotovs like ready at any moment in
case
I ran into one. I did not want to have to deal with facing one of those things with like a pistol or some shit. I think I love the design of the creatures, but the Shambler is definitely like it's this hulky, heavy thing that is just nasty.
Yeah, and the way that it like will charge at you is like terrifying, and then like this is something we didn't really talk about, but we've both kind of played the entire game with headphones on because we heard so much about how incredible the sound design in this game is, and it's really good. It does a really good job at making these infected things sound gross and terrible, and when it's in your ear like that, it really makes you like fear getting like too close to any of them, or getting into like a fist fight with some runners, or accidentally walking too fast in front of a clicker, and it decides that it's gonna rip your face off.
I think that all the audio developers and everyone put on the team of the creature design down to the audio has really succeeded, because the clickers feel incredibly powerful in terms of just like being scary. Like, you don't really want to deal with them. The infected are constantly like grunting and like shouting in pain, which I think is a really cool point, because it feels very horror-esque when you're just hearing monsters around. But by far, though, my favorite audio design is probably the Seraphite encounters with the whistling.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is such a fun idea. And, like, it makes sense because it's just them communicating. But the way that it's done is so eerie and horror-esque. I love it.
Speaking on that, I don't remember the name, unfortunately, of the guy that designed that the Seraphite whistle system, but he made like a giant thread on Twitter like a week ago or something like that, explaining on how he did it, and like all these different like whistle languages that he's studied and researched and kind of figured out how the Seraphites would communicate, and like
different pitches.
Yeah, like they made like a whole language just with whistles, and it's like that's the attention to detail that you can expect to see in this game, is stuff like that.
It's tremendously like well thought out. This game is very thorough in its details, which I feel like it's due to its long development time.
It essentially was like an entire generation almost, because like they did Uncharted 4 and the little side game, I forget what that's called.
I think it's called like Lost Legacy.
Like in between Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2, but like I really feel like this entire generation was building up to Last of Us Part 2 for Naughty Dog.
Yeah, there was finally the tech. There was finally I feel like there was just a right time for this game to come out. It being at the end of the generation, it being the final kind of game for the PlayStation 4 is absolutely fantastic. It's probably one of my favorite titles out there right now. I don't think that it's very replayable.
No,
it is a lot. Like, it's very long.
Yeah, you can. I think my first playthrough was about like 23 hours, and it's it depends on how you feel like about the narrative at the end of the game. Obviously, if you want to replay it, but I found out that as I was replaying it to kind of see what the new game plus would be like, skipping the cutscenes is just really long loading screens. Like we both played this on our PS4 Slim, so like the revamped version of the PS4, not the Pro. And it's like a jet engine, you know. This game really pushes it, but it's like even on the PS4 Slim, it doesn't feel like you're losing any of the quality or the detail or anything. Like they somehow managed to make this small little box do all of that, and they did it really well.
The only points the only time that I feel like you would really feel a lack of details and stuff is if you had the PS4 Slim and PS4 Pro like right next to each other.
Yeah, if you watch those videos or whatever.
Yeah, because that's really it. And honestly, it's not that big of a change in details. I think the game consistently graphically blows me away with either the gameplay or the cutscenes. It's all fantastic, and I'm just astonished with how it's able to fully utilize the tech here, because the Last of Us 1 in 2013, it utilized this tech for the console generation of being able to generate like rooms. However, it didn't really have the capacity to populate those rooms. So making a survival horror game with these big empty houses with like only like one or two items for each room was perfect for a game like The Last of Us.
Yeah, The Last of Us 1, like on when it launched on PS3.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. The frame drops were like all the time. Locked 30 if you hit 30, it did not look great. But whatever they did to the PS4 remaster, making it 60 FPS was definitely like great, and the upscale and graphics, like the Last of Us 1 remastered for the PS4 is like one of the best selling PS4 games besides The Last of Us Part 2 now.
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't played the first game, I highly recommend getting that remastered for the PS4.
Oh, absolutely. This is now one of the titles that I hope will be coming to PS5 as like a backwards compatible thing, because that'll make it super fun to play through.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to see.
Yeah. I think it'd be cool if they were like, fuck it, we got Last of Us DLC, PS5. But, nah.
I don't think they have DLC plans.
I don't think they do either.
They're supposedly making Factions its own separate game, but I don't know when that's coming out. The multiplayer from the first game is definitely something that I don't remember too much of, but I remember enjoying it, so I'm interested to see how that like goes forward. I don't know why, but I was thinking like maybe they're making this multiplayer mode its own standalone game to like.
We got Last of Us Battle Royale.
Yeah, it's like what if you like made your own character
Jarrett,
or whatever, and they could charge you microtransactions for your like your ghillie suit or whatever. You
have a battle pass. You can be Joel.
Yeah.
I think Jarrett, I think it'd be fucking sick if there was a battle royale for this game, but the map was the Seraphite Island.
Yeah,
and one side is like the wolves and the other are the Seraphites. You got like certain weapons. I think that'd be fucking sick.
Like if they turned all of Seattle into one big battle royale,
Oh,
I would probably play it. I don't know if I could tell you if it'd be good or not, if people would actually play it like they do Fortnite, but that's something that I would want.
They're not going to make that. They're not going to do that.
No.
I think it's too dense. It's too big. Modern Warfare is fucked, man. It's 201 gigabytes. Something that dense can't be a battle royale. But
yeah.
Anyway, back to the story. Let's talk about Abby's side.
Okay.
Let's talk about what she goes through.
When Ellie, she kills Owen and Mel in the aquarium, and that like breaks her. Like Ellie is now at the point where she realizes she just killed a pregnant woman. Meanwhile, her girlfriend is pregnant. You know. So when they get back to the theater, Ellie is content with just getting the hell out of there. They didn't get Abby, but the consequence of her revenge quest has led her down a path that I think she realizes that if she goes any further, not only is she putting her friends in danger, but she's not going to be able to come back from this. So Jesse, Tommy, and Dina and Ellie are all set to be like, let's get the fuck out of here and go home. That's not what happens.
No.
We have to say goodbye to Jesse, and that hurt. That really hurt.
That was fucked, man. I think I think the ending to Ellie's arc is such a good point to like leave off on. It's interesting because it's like, you have to stick with like the fact that, you're seeing all these flashbacks and establishing points of Owen and Mel and Nora, and it's like, well, I fucking beat the shit out of Nora and I kill Owen. I don't give a fuck about these dudes no more. Yeah.
We didn't touch on the museum part.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the flashbacks for Ellie.
That was really well done, and that gave me the Joel time that I wanted. Absolutely. Until we get the Joel time that is really sad, and we see their relationship fall apart. But Troy Baker as, like, old man Joel is not something I thought I wanted, but once I saw him in that first trailer, I was like, oh, I'm ready for it.
It's so good, man. When you are watching the museum part, Joel's clothing is just jeans and a blue t-shirt, and it's very it's interesting because that is the same outfit he wears in the beginning of The Last of Us 1.
Yeah,
where it's just like a plain
when he's getting
shirt.
out of there with Sarah and Tommy.
It's his dad outfit, and I think that I don't know, that really hit me. I was like, that's exactly what he was like wearing when he was like back when things were kind of normal.
Yeah.
I think that cutscene is really there to help put that point in of like Joel and Ellie's relationship is very much father-daughter. like that.
At that point in time, it is no doubt these Ellie is his kid now.
Yes.
And that's just the way that it's gonna be.
Yeah, it's like they've both kind of accepted, or Joel has really proven that he can be a good father for her, but he has essentially made that decision for her of like, I've killed everyone in this hospital. You are now going to be my daughter.
Joel's peace of mind came with an extreme cost that the museum scene, kind of makes the player forget about, in a sense, because we're so attached to Joel as a character that we're willing to kind of ignore the atrocities that he's committed in the first game. And I think that that's exactly how Naughty Dog wanted you to feel in that moment of like, even though Joel did what he did, everybody's selfish in some way in the end in this world. Like, there's no black and white right decision, and you see how confident Joel is in being a father, and like how he's willing to put everything he's done aside to give his daughter a good birthday present.
It is willing to play the devil's advocate of like, Joel taking Ellie from the hospital was a good decision. Like, it allows the player to fully have a realization that like, okay, Joel can be a father, but the game also needs to constantly ask you at what cost.
Yeah.
And it shows you how much he's paid for it.
And we get to see that when we transition halfway through the game after that theater sequence to Abby. And it opens as younger Abby in Salt Lake City, at the same zoo that Joel and Ellie saw the giraffe, and they free that zebra, and Owen comes in and he's like, they're here, it's time to go, like, she's here.
Yeah.
And that's when it clicked for me. I was like, oh shit. Like, I get it now.
I think I had all of that spoiled. I had seen spoilers a couple of months before launch, and what I saw were text posts of saying like, Abby is a character who kills Joel because Joel kills her dad, which was the doctor that was doing Ellie's
what
surgery.
Leaked.
Yeah, that was what leaked, and part of me was like, that's probably not real. And then I saw fucking gameplay, or I saw the cutscene of Abby just bashing his head in, and I was like, maybe this is real. So there's a certain point of like, that moment certainly hits hard because you're not really sure when it's gonna happen. But I remember being like, so the leaks are real. That was something I was kind of scared of, but I was also like, it's whatever.
Yeah, there's way more to see besides those leaks, and I think a lot of people when they saw the leaks decided that the game was bad and they weren't going to try it out and give it a bad review score. But you can't do that unless you play the game.
Yeah, you have seen the plot, not the story.
Yeah,
you have seen the things that you probably shouldn't have, but you have not seen everything that leads up to it.
You wouldn't watch, the end of a movie and then not any of the rest of it, and say that it's a bad movie.
Yeah. It's like what people were angry about with Endgame, of like, I just don't understand what's happening here. It's like, well, have you seen the other 22 movies?
Yeah. This one has like a requirement to get on the roller coaster, and it's 22 like movies of not great quality to really bad quality.
Oh, absolutely.
With some bangers in between.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, when you get to play as Abby, you get to see that stadium that they live at.
I fucking love that.
Well, that's a really good Naughty Dog set piece in showing how these people live.
Yeah. I love that, because I was like, yeah, you could have a whole society in here, and I love that they're using like the field as a farm.
Yeah, I don't know why it reminded me of like the part in Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. Like I was like, oh, we're doing that. I like half expected to see like Bane come out from the middle and be like, oh,
what the hell? Dude, that's like my favorite thing, is seeing behind the scenes of Dark Knight Rises and Tom Hardy just being like, Christian Nolan's like, what the fuck are you saying, man?
But yeah, I love that we get to see you know, how
Society.
the WLF live, and
Yeah.
it's like it's similar to what we see in Jackson, but it's like on a much larger scale. It's more militant,
It
you
is.
know?
It is more militarized. Like it feels like they've, because Seattle must have been like under martial law and must have had lots of resources because they
Yeah,
have a whole fucking platoon of army trucks. They have gasoline.
They
Have
just took
resources.
it all when they
Yeah.
won.
Yeah, they're like, fuck it, we're taking all your shit. Like everyone is well armed. In Jackson, it's all like hunting rifles and like revolvers and
Yeah,
shit. You have horses.
We're country bumpkins compared to these city military folk, you know? Like,
It's like Red Dead 2 and GTA 5.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like,
I-
there's like a whole car chase sequence,
Yeah.
and I was like, I didn't expect to see this in a Last of Us game.
No, I didn't expect to be like in the back of an army truck shooting an auto rifle.
Yeah, yeah.
Willing to just mow down people on horses. But that was sick though.
I remember the part when you get, like, right before you get to that chase sequence, it's like you check out your gun
Mhm.
and the dogs, and I was like, oh, I've killed all of these dogs. Like, oops.
Yeah, I like play ball with the dog, and I was like, I feel like I probably beat you to death with like a baseball bat with knives in it.
Yeah, like, I don't know.
Like I feel like you probably met your end here, and it probably didn't look very pretty, and I'm sorry.
Because,
But
like,
let me play catch with you right now.
yeah, because, like, the game, in the gameplay, like,
Mhm.
when you get to, like, parts where there's dogs, it's like, you don't have to kill those people, but those dogs will find you.
Yeah.
And if you kill the owner and leave the dog's just gonna try and fuck you up.
Yeah.
So, like, if you engage in combat with the dog, it's gonna die. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
You can try to run away. You can try to just leave the entire combat encounter
Right,
if
right.
the game will allow it. But most of the time, it's like, there's a dog. There's no way I can get through this. I either have to kill the dog to get past it, or I have to deal with the dog once I've killed everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of Ellie's world now. That's part of
Yeah, yeah.
this world is just violence. But I think that Ellie is way more. I think the reason why she's able to survive is because she's willing to do these violent things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
The reason why Joel survives is because he's willing to, stab people to death if he has to and do violent things to survive.
There's a I guess because there was a documentary made for the production for the first game,
Mhm.
but I think because of COVID and all of that, they've opted to do this podcast series on
Yeah.
Spotify, where they've interviewed like Ashley Johnson, Troy Baker, and Neil Druckmann, and all these people from Naughty Dog, and they went through all of Last of Us 1 and broke down the narrative and how they created it, and
That's awesome.
I think it's like a weekly thing. So like this week they picked up on part 2.
Oh.
And there's a part where the host, Christian Spicer, says like it's interesting to see Ellie and Abby as these characters because they don't have any attachments to like the old world, you
Mhm.
know? So they've grown up in this world where violence like that is just perfectly normal and it's what you gotta do to survive. Like it's shitty and it takes its toll on both of them, and you see that as you play, but like it's what they have to do, and you kind of see like I think in Ellie's case especially of like what Joel's like role as like throughout the first game has kind of taught Ellie in a sense of like Ellie is a cutthroat survivalist at the end of the day, you know.
Yeah. She even says it in one flashback point that she's a better shot than most of the other recruits. And it's like, there are points that Ellie has seen and done things that other people in this world have never had to do. I think Abby is very similar because she is a part of this more militarized society. She's like a angry point of this. Like it's the point of where survival is now enjoyment. Like you see the WLF and how they treat the scars and how they really tackle these sorts of things of like a military.
Their leader is like this guy that tortures and like does all these things to these scars, and it's like, yikes, dude. Like you understand how he was able to overcome the Fedra and like get into the position that he's in, and I believe Jeffrey Wright plays him. You know, the guy from he was one of the guys in the second Hunger Games movie. That's the first thing I've ever seen him in. But he's also the like assistant in Westworld.
Oh,
you know,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Dude, that's sick.
But he plays Isaac in this
Whoa.
game in the brief little cutscenes that you get to see him in.
That's nice. I love Isaac as a character.
Yeah, he's really interesting.
I think his intro of him like fucking in the bathroom with the scar person.
Yeah, they're all like naked and he's like covered in blood.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool point of the game is that on a technical side, the lighting is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
There's really good lighting aspects that you don't really think about that games need to have, and I'm really glad that they're able to have that. But Abby's story is interesting because it takes a turn of not revenge but more of saviorism.
Helping. You in the beginning, it's like it makes you understand why Abby did what she did, but then it kind of transitions into what the cost of her killing of Joel like has done. Like Seattle is in turmoil, you know. Besides their conflict with the Seraphites, it's like there's now all these people, you know, coming after her and taking people out, and like that section when you get to the second like base that you drive to, and Nora's like, look at all these bodies, dude. Like something's going on. Like this isn't just the Seraphites, you know. And then they see Jordan, and they're like, someone killed Jordan. Like I don't know what's going on. Yeah. And because he was at that when the horse blew up and Ellie and Dina shanked him to death. So you get to see like how Abby's choice to go after Joel is now affecting all of her friends and the people around her.
Absolutely. It's really interesting because we're gonna hold on to that point of the consequences of Abby's decisions of her old self, her old violent self, are still coming to haunt her. Because at the end of the story, both of our characters have to make this decision of, have they changed? Ellie has gone from a person who has had a pretty peaceful life and is able to hold a relationship to this violent revenge person who is willing to put it all on the line. And Abby has turned from this violent person to someone who's willing to forgive and look past her own violent upbringings in order to save people. And that's seen with Lev and Yara.
Yeah, Lev and Yara like serve their they allow Abby to kind of like realize that this war doesn't matter. Like what her people are doing, the WLF is not totally justified. Like
no,
they're shooting anybody on sight, you know, regardless of their, you know, allegiance to the scars, or like I think there's a part in the game where when you first encounter the WLF as Ellie, and they're like, we're just trespassers are dead. If you see anybody, kill them. Like that's just how these people live. And I think Abby kind of comes to terms with that, not only through Lev and Yara, but like the loss of all of her friends.
Absolutely. I love the fact that after so long, after an outbreak, that there are still faction disputes. There's still violence in these areas because of differences of belief. The WLF believe in, you know, taking what they can and surviving and militarizing and making sure that their own are taken care of. Meanwhile, the Seraphites believe in peace and prosperity.
Yeah, but they're like starting over. They don't use technology.
They're like fucking nomads and shit.
Yeah.
The only people who are allowed to use guns are like, I guess, warrior types. But
I wish that the game, maybe I missed it. Like I know I didn't get every collectible or read every note, but the game doesn't do a good job at explaining how the Seraphite faction, like the religion, came about, and like why they are the way that they are.
You never learned who that woman is.
Yeah, like it kind of hints on it that she was like a WLF person that like renounced their ways, I guess, and decided to like she like becomes like a martyr essentially. But I don't understand what the religion is, and I don't know if like I wouldn't say the game like that is bad that they don't tell us what they're all about, but I think that I would have liked to know more, which is why I think that a Lev like DLC kind of side story that can show us his past, but as well as bridge the future, like go like swap, you know, between the end of 2 and what he grew up in, you know.
Yeah, like it tells a bit of a backstory, but also it ends where he's all of a sudden the apostate, with him and Yara having to run away and flee their lives. I think that'd be cool. That'd be interesting. There's definitely a point in the game where I felt like the Seraphites were this violent, incredible threat, and their attempts to humanize them were interesting because you never really saw like normal people, even in the island, even when you're on their land. You only really see like the same couple of soldier character types that you have to fight, whether it's like the tier people or it's the simple grunts and things like that.
Yeah, because by that point, I really didn't feel all that bad about killing them. No. You know, like, because not only does Abby not feel bad about it in the beginning because, you know, there's this war between her people and them, but once you realize that they're also persecuting Lev and you're kind of protecting Lev this whole time, it's like, yeah, I have no issue with mowing these people down. You know, like, I think the war between both sides is stupid, but these people are trying to murder me, and I don't know. I think I felt more, like, kind of iffy about all the WLF murder as Ellie than I did about all the Scar murder as Abby.
Yeah.
It felt a little bit more justified.
I am glad that the story introduces us to the Scars as Ellie. It shows us this violent, fucked up, deranged enemy faction group. And I like that Abby must have to all of a sudden be a part of the humanization of them through Lev. I like that perspective is given. But yeah, let's move on to the Santa Barbara portion of the game. The post ending, the almost fourth act.
Yeah, it's like an epilogue that you actually get to kind of play through.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's probably like my least favorite scenery of the game, or not like scenery, but just like exploring it and going through it. It felt
well, by that point, as the player, we're so exhausted. Yeah, you know, like it's just like
one work table. You've already got most of your upgrades. You've got all your weapons. There's nothing really like to gain from here because it's not exactly the same as Seattle, and it's not any other location.
And as the player, you don't even really want to be there. You know what I mean? No. Like you see this life that Ellie and Dina have built for themselves since coming out of all of this, and you're like, why? Like, I can understand why Ellie left, you know, but as the player, I didn't want her to.
Yeah, no, you definitely want both of these characters to have, like, peaceful lives, and where they left off would have been perfectly fine. You know, Ellie with Dina having a happy farm life, and Abby being with Lev, finding the Fireflies.
It's the happy ending that we all want, but we're not going to get.
Yeah. The game's ending is pretty amazing. I'm extremely fond of how this game ends because it's something that's very powerful. I love how it looks. I love how it feels. And what I mean by the ending is from the point that Ellie frees the prisoners in Santa Barbara to the credits. Mm-hmm. I love walking through the beach and seeing like Abby strung up, and she's so thin and frail and has been this prisoner of war essentially for so long, but she's not really a prisoner of war. She's just tortured.
Right, yeah.
And
she tried to escape, and that's why they strung her up on those pillars.
They literally crucified her.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a powerful thing to do from Naughty Dog, to be like, are you willing to, like, you know, kill this person? They're so broken and frail. And, oh, man. I like that she looks at Ellie, and it's, again, that point of Abby's consequences for her violent actions have followed her here. And in a way, without her doing that, she would have just died on that beach. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't have really made it to the Fireflies. She wouldn't have done anything. So there's definitely a point of that. But the game, oh, man.
It's weird because it's like the end of Last of Us 1. It's like the whole goal post for Last of Us 1 is get to the Fireflies, you know?
Yes.
And
this game to end with that.
This for Abby, for like Abby's point of view to end, like that's her goalpost. It's like, oh, it's all kind of like full circle, you know.
Yeah. There is nothing more that I think one of my favorite cutscenes from this game is definitely the ending with Joel.
Yeah, that one hit me pretty hard.
That's a powerful moment because you realize that things were going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
There was going to be forgiveness from both sides of Ellie with Joel and Ellie with Abby to be like willing to forgive this past because she's lost so much.
And it impacted me so much more when I started over and I get to that very first exploration part as Ellie in the snow and she's like, yeah, I'm thinking about like watching a movie with Joel, and I was like, oh no. Like they were almost fixed. Like it was so close. Nobody gets anything in this game, and it's so sad.
It shows how short-lived peace is in this world.
Yeah.
Whether it's, I don't know, but it's a tremendous technical game that has truly pushed the limits of game narrative and technology. I'm extremely fond of it.
Call us Sony shills if you want to. Like I think as we're starting to wrap up here, I think if you're skeptical about this game, I would hold your judgment until you fully experience it. Like I mean, if you're listening this far and you haven't played the game yet, I don't really see a point in playing it. If you're just in it for the review and the spoilers or whatever, like if you've not heard anything about this game except for the fact that a lot of people don't like it, I wouldn't let that deter you from picking up the game.
Mm-hmm. This is definitely a game that's like, if you're looking to have a good PS4 title, this is a good one to end on. I think as well the gameplay is fantastic. No matter what you think about narratively,
100% improvement from the first game.
Even like just it being a whole new thing is fantastic. There's very few cons. What would you rate this? How would you rate this game?
I think one of my bigger issues with it is the fact that we get to see Abby's friends through these flashbacks, but because I've already killed them as Ellie by the time we get to see them, I'm not as sympathetic towards them as I am for Ellie's friends like Dina and Jesse. I really liked Owen. Like I thought he was the perfect like foil character for Abby, of just like this childhood friend that, you know, they have a history together, you know, they've been together for so long, and Owen is really trying to do the right thing by his friends, kind of. He tries to like run away with Abby, you know, after they have sex, and he's like, we could just leave right now. I was like, you got a girl pregnant and you're really not okay with it. Like that's what the vibe I'm getting from him. But
fucked up, man.
If the flashbacks, like I'm not a writer at all. Like I don't think that that's my skill set in its entirety. But I think if it was moved around a little bit in the sequence that you get to experience these characters, I probably would have liked Abby's group a whole lot more than I did. I don't think there's any saving Mel, even if you rearranged I didn't feel bad for her at all. I thought she was annoying the entire time. Nora was kind of like barely even in there, and like Manny was kind of cool.
He's fucking great, dude.
Yeah, for the parts that you get to see, like I kind of like, he was like, oh, this is the Jesse in the WLF.
Yes. Yes.
But like, I don't know. I think the games, it could have maybe done better at the Abby stuff, narrative wise. The gameplay, I loved her stuff way more than Ellie.
Absolutely.
Think. But if I were gonna rate the game, that's something that I've been, you know, since we decided to do a podcast, I've been thinking about, of like,
what's
review scores are like they're hard to talk about, I feel like, because I think video game, like, I'm way more open to scoring like a movie because that is something that's on a much smaller scale. That
it's not like changing the way that you go through a movie.
It's hard to like say a number for something that you are interacting with, you know? Like it's hard to be like, this is like a 100, 10 out of 10
Yeah.
For something that is nuanced for every single person that plays it, you know?
Yeah. So 3 stars.
I think I would say, I'm not going to do a number score.
Yeah.
But I would recommend this game if you are looking for a story that is not something you've seen before in a video game, and something that kind of subverts the tropes of revenge and zombie stories and all of that. I think if that's something that you're interested in, then play this game.
It's definitely a good quarantine game. It's a lot. It's long. It's dense. It's definitely involved. It's something that's very entertaining, especially now.
Yeah, that being said, though, this game is really violent, and it deals with a lot of like character death. You know, as we've talked about, like if that's something that you're not up for right now, I probably wouldn't play the game.
This isn't like something that you buy for your kid for
their birthday. Like I remember playing Last of Us 1 when I was like 14. You know, like if you handed me Last of Us 2 as a 14-year-old, I would be like, oh
fuck. I do think that, like, if anyone who doesn't really enjoy violence and stuff like that, because that's another thing that it succeeds in, is the visual effects of gore.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very well done.
I think I can't remember the name of the developer, sadly, but I remember seeing something from the guy that spent a year and a half on the blood systems in this game, and how that was his job, and he did it really well. Like,
I'm sure.
You know that this game's like gory and violent when they spend a year and a half developing that tech, you know?
Absolutely. Overall, good game, fantastic video game, gonna be a very high title for a long time, I feel like. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of other games coming out that will, like, dethrone this. Looking forward to doing more podcasts and discussions about games and news. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.
Bye, everybody.